Asia CEO is really a sought-after brand and recognition among the private sector. I work abroad as an OFW, and I've seen the experience of how Filipino were treated that time. So I always thought of creating an event someday to really recognize Filipinos and also market Philippines.
Let's present Philippines in a positive light. And the goal is expand your business, start your business, move your business to Philippines, hire Filipinos. They're good people to work with, and you'll do well. That's the goal.
Way back when we were the poor or sick country of Asia, and now if you take a look at, for example, the BPO industry, we're #1 in the world. There's a lot of potential for the country, and if we are really going to see fruition that we are going to be one of the top economies by 2050, I think it is very important for us to really pool our resources together.
And we always believe from the beginning that this association was the right medium, the right structure, and the right outfit to really put the Philippine business community on top of the agenda for the Filipino people and also for the international community.
Well, it gives me a fantastic insight in terms of how broad the industries are and how many different types of successes that are contributing to the growth and inclusive growth of this nation.
We have to create a future where our next generation of talent and leaders is prepared for all of the new opportunities that will present themselves.
Asia CEO Forum is very unique because it is more than any other forum emphasizing that this is about nation building.
Economic growth is a very wide subject, and Asia CEO Forum always find the right angle with the right topic at the right time to talk about, and that's why there is such attraction to these events.
They connect people, but they also create a platform for transfer of best practices, best knowledge.
I believe in the vision of Richard and Rebecca. I think they have this vision to help make the Philippines a first world country in 2030.
And with our partnership together, I know that we're achieving a lot of things.
Thank you for what you're doing. We applaud your efforts. We're proud and happy to be your partners.
We encourage other companies to join in and be a sponsor, and I'm very, very sure that they'll find it worthwhile.
Please welcome Father William Bustamante, Parish Priest in Nananglaging Saklolo, Tagaytay City, to lead us with the invocation.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty Lord, worker of wonders, we praise you for the majesty of all your works. In becoming one of us, you show the dignity of labor by working with your own hands, leaving us a noble pattern to follow. We thank you for blessing us with manifold talents and gifts, which are expressions of your excellence and creativity. Grant us your grace to see the value of working, to discover and be grateful for all our abilities. Fill us with vigor and enthusiasm in doing our task. Help us to cherish the presence and company of one another in our workplace. Inspire us with love as we perform our duties and responsibilities. Bestow the gift of wisdom in all our endeavors and decisions. Unite us all in the spirit of cooperation and concern in all our undertakings. May we grow in our relationship with one another as we work together towards success for your greater glory. With hearts full of thanksgiving, we send this prayer to you, who is always at work in us with the Father and the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, elas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang pinirang, kuyagan ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinagang tula, kawit sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magtitingin. Lumanang araw ng warhabit pagsinta, mo'y langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na barkay pag-aakit, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Bagong bayani ang turing sa ating mga overseas Filipino workers, sapagkat ang kanilang pagpapagod at pakikipagsapalaran sa ibayong dagat ay hindi lamang pakinabang sa kanilang mga pamilya, kundi maging sa ating bansa. Did you know there are more than 12 million OFW bagong bayani working abroad? We are excited to present the first Asia Expat Filipino Forum. Here, many of the region's most connected OFWs talk about issues related to expatriate Filipinos in key markets like Singapore, Hong Kong, United Arab Emirates, and many more. Disruptions caused by COVID have been devastating for many people. What is in store for these hardworking people who contribute so much to Filipinos and the nation's economy? Presenting our speakers today. Asia CEO Forum Expat Filipino 2021 is presented by Philinvest, PLDT, with major sponsors BioOil, LBC, Multisys, Regis. Let us all welcome Rebecca Bustamante, the CEO of Asia CEO Events.
Welcome to the show mga kababayan. Ng tawag ay Expat Filipino para i-recognize natin ang lahat ng mga OFW kasi tayo ang nagdadala ng mga negosyo at pera sa ating bayan. Kaya tayo patungo sa First World Philippines dahil sa atin. Kaya ngayon ang mga speakers ay i-share nila ang kanilang mga story kung paano sila nakabangon sa kahirapan being an OFW. And of course, ang isang reason din ay paano tayo magturo para tayo mag-save ng pera, mag-invest, para tayo wag nang umalis dito sa ating bayan, kundi lahat tayo bumalik dito para papunta tayo sa First World Philippines. And guess what? Ang goal natin para to be First World Philippines on or before 2030, and we strongly believe not together, yes, we can do it. First World Philippines, mga kababayan, kaya natin yan, kaya magtulungan tayo at magturo tayo kung paano mag-ipon, paano kumita ng pera at magtulungan. So, let's hear these stories, itong mga speakers natin, kung paano sila, yung mga experience nila sa ibang bansa para at least tayo patungo sa kagalingan ng bansa. Maraming salamat at good luck.
Please welcome our host, Mr. Richard Mills, Chairman, Asia CEO.
Welcome everyone to this version of Asia CEO Forum. It's a special edition for Expat Filipinos. What is ahead for them? This is a very important segment of the Philippine population, a large part of the nation's population work overseas in jobs ranging from maids, such as where my wife began her career years ago, all the way up to senior management and CEOs in other countries. So a very big part of the nation's GDP is also involved. Filipinos have a great love for the families, keeps them together, and they want them to do well. So large sums of money is transferred back to the country to keep Filipino families intact, safe, and well-fed. So glad to have you with us for this special edition focusing on expat Filipinos and OFWs on this Asia CEO Forum. Glad to have you with us. We welcome our next speaker, Roby Tor from the United Arab Emirates. She is Managing Director of the People Bureau International and also very active in the human resource community in UAE. Past president and board of directors member of the Philippine HR Practitioners Association. UAE, if you don't know, is a huge destination for Filipino expatriates. More than 500,000 people work in UAE. This is huge. So something like 20% of the population of Dubai, for instance, is estimated to be Filipino. So a remarkable presence there. So we're really pleased to have Roby talk about people's experience there and how things are going and so on. So please welcome our special guest and a heck of a nice person, Roby Tor. Glad to have you, Roby.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's a very, very heartwarming introduction for me. So good morning, Richard, and good morning to all our kababayan, so my fellow panelists here, and those who are watching this, how do I call this, the CEO OFW Forum across the globe. Okay, so thank you for inviting me here to talk about the journey of OFW here in United Arab Emirates. So I think the best way to start this is to contextualize overseas Filipino workers in UAE, Richard. So there are those who belong to the marginalized category, the house helpers, okay, the household workers, okay, who maybe are 10% of the documented Filipino workers in UAE. And there are those who belong to the economically available positions, and those who are workers, the office workers, skilled workers like engineers, architects, ITs, F&B workers, etc. So these are the types of workers that you have here in UAE. In the literal meaning of the term overseas Filipino workers, both categories are considered workers, not documented via OWA and POEA. So whether you arrive here as a tourist visa or with employment visa, you will still be considered as an OFW eventually, because you will still be passing through our Philippine government agencies for consular services such as the exit clearance, the notarial, the passport renewals. And these services actually require documents pertaining to your employment. So you really have to present this. So that makes you later on considered as Filipinos or documented Filipino workers here in UAE. And that count is very valuable because that is equivalent to millions or probably millions of dollars of remittances to our country, which would eventually boost our economy. So anyway, the diaspora of Filipinos in UAE can be traced from 25 years ago. I can see that Filipinos here have over the same number of years. Now you'll see second generation of Filipinos migrants here. The distinct characteristics of Filipinos in UAE migrants is our proactiveness, I would say. No, we've learned from experience. We were considered as minority, but over the years we have proven our worth. Now, many Filipinos over the years have climbed the ladder to higher positions. So I remember there was a time where there was about like 60 professional organizations with 200 plus members each, accredited by the Philippine Consul General Office in UAE. But this was abolished because of some, federal legal issues in this part of the world. But just to say, that much of professionals in the UAE. That's why in UAE we are, I think, top 10 of the highest remitter of I would know in 2020, I think we have remitted around $1.2 million. So that's a huge amount of contribution to our economy in the Philippines. So Filipino workers here are employed in various sectors like architectural, constructions, cargo, shipping, designs, engineering, energy, IT, even marketing, and most especially the hospitality and medical sectors. There are also people who are employed in real estate, retail, telecom, and tourism. So very diverse industries for very industrious Filipinos. And these are people who are from rank and file to the executive level to probably highest positions in the organizations. Okay, by and large, Richard, the Filipino narrative in UAE 15, 20 years ago has always been about Filipino domestic helpers and construction workers. So the narrative has obviously been updated. We have broken the stereotypes. Many are recognized for who and what we really are, and that drive to be recognized is, I think, still there for the rest of the remaining 500,000 plus Filipino workers here in UAE. And just like any other progressive countries, income is a major factor in working in UAE. Okay, based on my research, 40% here earn salary below 3,000 dirhams, so that will be around 20 to 40,000 pesos per month. 37% earn 3,000 to 799 dirhams. 18% makes the 8,000 to 12,000 to 12,999 dirhams, and 5,000 earn more than 13,000 dirhams. So, and just like all OFWs across the world, we look for the stable job to address our family's needs, and at the same time, there's an opportunity for us to grow. So a majority of the Filipinos in UAE are really into that, progressing our career path, and at the same time being able to help our families back in the Philippines. Okay, so that's the professional side of it, and I'll probably be talking about the COVID-19 and how it has affected UAE. So COVID-19 has, of course, affected UAE as well very much. A lot of job and lives were lost. More than 3,800 OFWs, excluding their family members, were repatriated last year. It was a very distressful situation. UAE is very strict with regards to this. It was almost a year, but nobody goes out on the road, or dare to go out of the road because of the fines imposed to those who will break this policy, these regulations. So, as I've said, this was our kabayans repatriations, dead or alive. So but we are grateful because the embassy, the Philippine Embassy, the Philippine Concerns Office, and the POLA, Philippine Overseas Labor Office, are very helpful and supportive. There may be some who may be dismayed about the services because it was not beyond their expectations. But just imagine, there's 500,000 of us here in UAE. So the majority are still happy because we feel that amidst these numbers, these huge numbers of Filipinos here, we are still attended to. Everything that we wanted to say to the Philippine agencies officials are being listened to, and are they taking actions regarding that. So the support is very huge, very tremendous. In general, the programs related to COVID-19, Richard, such as the AKAP, cash assistance of DOLE. We have also the Tabang educational assistance from OWA. These were well communicated and utilized by our kababayans here in UAE. So, and the word of mouth regarding this assistance is very much active in all the communities, Filipino communities who are residing or spread across the 7 Emirates of the country. Okay, so having said that, Richard, I believe that in UAE, it takes two to tango in order to achieve a livable community amongst our kababayans and the other nationalities here. We rely, as Filipinos, we rely with each other. The various community groups, organizations are actually a big help to us, because through that we can have a sense of camaraderie. The concept of bayanihan is really there. We don't feel left out, because there are organizations, whether it's professional or social or volunteer work. There is an opportunity for us to be heard. Even if you belong to the lowest sector of the industry, of the organization, you still have the opportunity to be heard. So and we are also grateful that apart from these community organizations, as I've said, the embassy, the consulate general office, the labor office are very hands-on, hands-on in spite of the number of Filipinos here. They're very patient with us. Because after all, it's the same flag that we carry. We carry the Philippines flag. So we are just one of the same. And we always say we are proud of our country. So we have to, stand by it and really help each other and make the Philippine flag prouder. And I think that's it, Richard. Mabuhay ang mga OFWs, mabuhay po ang bansang Pilipinas. Maraming salamat.
Okay, thank you very much, Roby. Yeah, I really appreciate you being with us. I'm just so impressed. There's so much going on in UAE for Filipinos. So thank you very much again.
You're welcome.
Let's keep going with our next speaker is Pastor Ray Abahero. He is based in Hong Kong, where he's been for quite a number of years, many years in fact, and works with a lot of people in Hong Kong, Macau, and other places, helping them and making sure they are safe and through the difficulties of their life. So a lot of lessons, because he sees a lot of issues with a lot of Filipinos. Let's hear some interesting stories from Pastor Ray Abahero. And the show is yours, Ray. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Richard. And this is really like an amazing thing that I think God has given us an opportunity to share to you some of the things that is going on here in Hong Kong. Because of the new legislations or law that is passed on to Hong Kong, actually this affects a lot on our OFW, especially now there's so many like Hong Kong people that is leaving Hong Kong. And there's a fact from the news that I read, I think it's about like 80,000 people leaving Hong Kong. That means most of these people that are leaving Hong Kong, actually, they have helpers. That means that could really decrease the numbers of our helpers, of our OFW working in Hong Kong. So that affects the jobs. So many are terminated and many have to go back to Philippines. So and this, we find a lot of people as well that because of also COVID, that our hiring from Philippines is difficult. So some of our OFW here, they take advantage. Because some employers are offering a higher job, so they terminate themselves, they break the contract. But the problem is, many employers complain because they're paying so much for the agency, and they got into trouble. So they complain to the immigration. So there's many Filipino OFW here. When they break their contract, the immigration will not give them any visa at all. So this is one thing that we are helping and giving them encouragement, because many of them are really feel sad about, they wanted to have good income, but yet they lose their job because they take advantage of the new not actually legislations, but there's a lot of policy in Hong Kong right now because of COVID, so they can process their contract here. But the problem is, when you just break your contract, the tendency of the immigrations will not give you a new visa. So my advice is on this part is if you are working, if you're listening to us right now, and if you have a job, do not break your contract. Because if you break your contract, there's a tendency that you're going to find another job, or you go back to Philippines. And we've been helping a lot of terminated OFW here. I connected with the agency, and many were denied to have their works. And so what we do as a church, we give them some food, guidance, and pray for them because they need some encouragement. That's one thing that we do. And also really give them an advice that if possible, just stay with your job. If your job is not really, if your employer is not giving you that difficulties, stay and do not break, because do not take advantage of the big salary that the employer is being offered right now. So, and we have been helping a lot. Also now there's our OFW also coming back to Hong Kong. There's just new arrivals that they're in quarantine. One of the things that we also do is send them some help, give them some, we call it ayuda. We call it ayuda. So we give them free SIM card, face masks, some biscuits, some foods, or some Bibles so that they can read while they are in quarantine for 21 days. Because here in Hong Kong right now, if you come from overseas to work, you will be quarantined for 21 days. And that's a lot. That's lonely. So we give them some online prayer and also Bible study to help them. And what else do we do? And in our church, we have done a lot of people that experiencing a trauma because of the situations of the Hong Kong now. It's not easy to work. It's not easy. Many employers also give them too much demands, so they cannot concentrate. They face stress, and they face challenges in their life and also in their family. So things that is happening right now in Hong Kong are actually factors is not going better because of the situations of many people are moving outside from Hong Kong, and not many employers are giving them jobs. And even those people that also like to work, but the immigration is another part, won't give them a job because of the complaints sometimes from the employer that, hey, he terminated his job. So I expend a lot, so they don't. And what else? As a pastor, I have been here for 30 years, and we're serving from 200,000 OFW here in Hong Kong. That's including, of course, Hong Kong residents. And one thing that really needed for everyone is to have a spiritual homes that they can help them, give them some encouragement, and also a community that you can mingle together and a community that you can express your problems, community that really listen to you, and that's very helpful if you are in Hong Kong. And the challenges of working abroad is really high, and my experiences as OFW for 30 years, it is only my relationship with God that will help me overcome all these challenges. And for me as a pastor, I really encourage everyone to have that community of believers to help you and support you, not only here in Hong Kong, but also back home in the Philippines with your family. And another thing is, we also help many people on this, like people that are terminated. You know, sometimes their employers let them go out in the middle of the night. So one of the things that we do is really go and help them, pick them up, and give them some shelter. Our church, my church, doesn't have a shelter, but we bring them to our friends' agency, help them find a job, and wow, you know, these things is a very basic things that we do, but yet again very meaningful to them and their family. So many things that's going on right now, especially because of the national security law, and affected like the economy of Hong Kong as well. So another reason that why our OFW being terminated, because family has no more job to do or no business. So this is another thing. And so this is the main thing. And for our government, I believe, I wish that our government are listening, hope that they can give assistance to those people, like are terminated, and give them free boarding house, something like that. Or if they go to the consulate and ask some help, like especially if there's some labor cases, hope that they can assist, because this is what we need. And also, as I think, very important thing is like for those already working, the complaints of long hours of work, especially this time, because there's a scarcity of helpers right now. So they tend to work long hours. And also the food allowance, I've mentioned this like a while ago, like, you know, the food allowance that they need to receive from their employer. I think those are things that if our government can help them, give them these things, I think that's really helped our OFW. And my prayer is like our government can really implement those laws and force the government of Hong Kong, or help the government of Hong Kong to really let those food allowance, long hours, and also shelters, hope that they can offer to help them. And we as a church, we will continue to provide help, spiritual help to our kababayans when they are in trouble. You can call us if you have problems. You can call us. We can pray for you, give you advice, practical help. That's what we do, helping you in your labor disputes, and many things actually that we do here. And yeah, if you are here in Hong Kong and then you happen to listen to this, call us up and we can, for sure, we can help you. And may the Lord bless us all as we work to support our family back home. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Pastor Ray. Yeah, so keep up the work you are doing in Hong Kong. I know there's challenges you read about all the time, but people like you there helping people. So thank you again. All right, our next speaker is really a lively one. This is Pamela Wildheart Pilapil. She's a celebrity show host, recording artist, event and media consultant, and adored by OFWs in Singapore, where she is based, and really done a lot, award-winning, all of this for the work she is doing for our Filipino expatriates. So please welcome Pamela Wildheart Pilapil. And you're ready. Get ready for a show. Glad to have you, Pamela.
Thank you very much, Richard, and live here from Singapore. Hi, mabuhay mga kababayan. Hello, everybody worldwide. Of course, in Singapore, they call me Pamela Wildheart, but many people really call me Pamela Pilapil. I am from Cebu, and I'm very honored and privileged to be invited to this I would call this very exciting and eye-opening program because I have a lot of things to share. It is a very big topic. Filipinos in Singapore, what is the progress? What are they doing? What is the story? What are the news details? It's very long, but I would like to start with the positive things because I'm a very positive-minded person. Singapore is a country, to begin with, that is really concerned about the welfare of Filipinos. I've lived here for almost I'm not sure I should reveal the number of years. It will reveal my age a little bit, but okay, almost 30 years in Singapore. Oh my goodness. And was married to a Singaporean wonderful husband who passed away, unfortunately, on July 15, 2021, only this year. It's a sad story, but life goes on, and I have a lot of things to share with you. First and foremost, when you look at the newspapers in Singapore, especially during COVID, we realize that there is always news about our Filipina kababayans, because we don't only have Filipinas in Singapore, we also have Filipinos. We have actually a very strong demarcation line. I call it demarcation because it divides itself very interestingly. First of all, we divide it in such a way that we have the professionals, and they have the S passes or dependents pass holders, and we have the work permit holders. So based on the latest statistics, it was an interesting number. And this was straight from the Ministry of Manpower Singapore's number that in 2020, there are 247,400, OFW. And we're talking about our foreign domestic workers, okay? And then there's about 245,600 in 2021. This is interesting numbers being given because maybe I move on to my first very interesting article I want to share with you in this slide. Okay, you can see for yourselves that being a multicultural, country that we are. Moving on. Yes, there is instead a growing demand of Filipinas to come to Singapore despite the COVID. That is a very interesting news, don't you think so? Because instead of many countries saying, oh, we don't welcome you or whatever, there is a rise in need because many Singaporeans are working from home and they're very challenged by working at home with the children running around. They can't cope with cooking. And I myself experience it and many of my friends. Okay, I have a lot of careers, by the way. I'm not going to go back into myself, but I do lecture in a university. I have a lot of things. I'm a career woman, but I do a lot of Filipino projects. So this is interesting that I can really understand it from a different perspective. Moving on, and yes, it's even more interesting to see. I'll show you pictures first. Okay, I was talking about the numbers of Filipinos. Moving on, please. And you can see I do a lot of lectures or enrichment courses for Filipinos in Singapore. Okay, so can we move on the pictures? Just click. And I do also beauty pageants, which is really looking into these contestants. I teach them, I groom them, and it's not only for Filipinas. Thank you very much. I participated in a book, which I contributed 2 poems. Now, before we move on to that, going back to the book, there's no need to flip into the book. It's interesting because that is a contribution by Filipina workers, the foreign workers. These are my students. And you can imagine what kind of courses I'm teaching them. We can move forward. I'm teaching them courses in stress management, English, yes, and character building, which is actually the professional attitude, call center, and telephone manners. Okay, this is only outside of the university that I'm teaching. Okay, well, after you've seen this, please hold on to this page. I just want you to hold on to that while I continue talking about the developments in Singapore. Aside from this interesting news, we also learned that the doctors in the new requirement for 2022, that will be next year now, the doctors will be checking on the BMIs, okay? The body mass index of our kababayans, our FDWs in Singapore every year. And in fact, they may increase it to twice a year. They just want to see how healthy they are and if there's any cases of suspicious abuse. So I'm giving you the good news first, because it's interesting. And of course, the MOM, or the Ministry of Manpower, and that is the body that is really authorized to deal with our OFWs, they will also be interviewing Initially, they'll be going house to house 2 times in a year. Our Filipina kababayans, they interview them with or without the employers, or they can also be they will be building three. I heard, and I think it's accurate. 3 centers which they can go and visit in the event that they're being abused by their employers. So I would easily say that Singapore is taking a very proactive stance when it comes to this. Having said that, I would like you to take a look at this on screen. Filipino maid watched her husband pass away over a video call. This is very recent. And what I'm trying to say is that owing to COVID, many of our Filipino kababayans are now based at home, the usual Sunday off, where they're actually able to sit down in their favorite places, like Lucky Plaza is well known for it in Singapore, or other places where they can socialize, meet their friends, talk to them about what did you do this week, what are you doing. I mean, this is, and they go to church. Well, this has changed. They're now staying at home because most of the employers are very worried with the COVID situation in Singapore being a very small country. So now they're based at home. And so there are many of them who heard that their family members are sick or passing away and they cannot go home. It's a very heart-wrenching scenario. Like when my father passed away, I couldn't go home. There was a lockdown in Cebu at that time. So it was a very traumatic experience for me. Same as many of our kababayans who actually are cooped up in this home and with their employers. And then although the employers treat them well, not everyone though, but they do have this feeling of homesickness. And when someone is sick, very close to you, and you see them, well, one of the employers did a very good task, or how to allay or give this maid moral support. They watch the passing of her husband online. That's new to me. And I even had a tear in my eye. They watch it together, an employer together with her maid, sitting down and sharing that kind of pain. This is what brings together the working together with your employers and also you as an employee. I have taught, grew many Filipinas. And in terms of doing community service, I do a lot of them. I host big shows. In fact, I do training for them many times for home organizations here, humanitarian organization for migrant economics, okay? And they are very important because if maids do run away, they go there, or probably FAST, another organization, and ASCII at the time, and many other organizations. They're very concerned about the welfare of our Filipinos, and they have a place to go to talk about how they feel. Still, there are many cases which are undetected, and of course, we still have our Philippine embassy. So nothing perfect, just nothing perfect, because there are many cases where they're unreported. What I'm trying to say is that when they have these avenues and they know where to go, where to report, and what to do, they become informed citizens. I would like to move on to the last page. After working for my slide, moving on, and after having worked for a very long time, I would like to see the next slide, please. Yes, and this is coming from me straight based on my experiences. I think we focus so much on the physical health of our OFWs. I have one at home, and in fact, I wrote music for her. I have a lot of songs dedicated to OFWs, and I call her my general manager at home. She manages my home affairs. Okay, and she's been with me for 21 years of her life. Can you imagine, in Singapore, I have her with me all the way. Well, one important thing is we do not just want to focus, and these are my suggestions, how we can work better with them. And also based on my interviews and based on my interaction, we shouldn't be focused on maids. We call them maids all the time. Yes, they are. They are, actually. There's no other name but that, but there should be a better way of showing them respect. They're not. That is a very old term now. It has actually evolved. In fact, I consider my general manager of my domestic affairs in my residence. She's actually not that. She's family. I don't want to talk about her physical health alone. That our doctors can take on too. But there's also times when you as an employer should look at their mental health. And this happens so much because of the different backgrounds or probably where they come from. And so, example, gaining respect for them, the way they work, but also understanding that when you talk to them, you need to understand the differences culturally. They have a different pace. And like when I talk to my my general manager, that's what I'm going to call Jennifer, and I talk to her, she always speaks in a very loud voice, like, and she's really loud. I say, can you tone down a bit? And you know what? This is very funny, but this is what she told me. Madam, I come from the mountains. Every day I need to bring out the goats, the goats, GOATS. I said, huh? Because her English needs improvement, but I can understand her well. I'm not against, it's just the way she speaks. She says, I get the goats. First I didn't get it, and I let them eat the grass in the mountain. In another mountain is my brother, and I have to call him and say, are you finished feeding the goats? And my brother has to listen to me, and you need to have a loud voice. So madam, forgive me, my voice is very loud. I find that very amusing. There must be times where you share it, but the mental health, they're easily demoralized. I noticed that when I talk to stress management courses I do, many of our OFWs are telling me the pain they go through, not being able to send enough, what they are always facing, where members of the family add on to the pressure, calling them almost every day, asking for money. That to me costs them a lot of stress, especially during these difficult times where the salary may have some problems or they may even lose their jobs. Well, I think that's important, and then we must ensure that they can rest properly. Right now, I talked to them, and there were some issues that was interesting to me. They said that in the past, they were able to go out of the house on a Sunday, totally out of the house. And this is why it's interesting, because the Ministry of Manpower Singapore stated that you must give, in the coming 2022, your OFWs 1 day compulsory leave without pay. Not without pay, not compensated by money. You must give them time off. Because right now, what's happening in many cases in Singapore is this OFWs stay at home. And then they're just given a certain amount of money to sort of allay the time, or to pay them for the compensation, as a compensation for the time they spend at home. So these measures are important, and this being free means their own time, their own space, because they said, and this is what I gathered from my interviews, that actually stay at home, they still can't help it. Sometimes, without meaning to, the employers will call them to help them with this and that. So it doesn't become a total rest day. They can't go out because of COVID, and they're also worried about them. And then they need to break away. This is the first lesson I teach all our OFWs. The amount of time you spent on self-pitying. This is a complex, a victim complex, like, I'm just a maid. And they keep using it themselves. I'm just like this, my education is bad, I can't do much. And this happened to me for a long time also with my general manager. I told her to get hold of a computer, learn how to be digitized. And she was always telling me, I'm not born to be a digital person, madam. I'm born to sweep the floor. But this is not true. Absolutely not. You can use the computer. You can use your phones. I have no problem with it. Get digitized. Get educated. This is the new language. You will save a lot of money than calling home. Well, she's now very savvy. And I have to bring it up that Jennifer is very savvy. She has a Bluetooth. She has internet, she has access, and she has the phone that she can use liberally. What I'm saying is that they have to take this complex out, because once you are out of this complex, you begin to see that everybody, regardless of work, is empowered to become better than what we are. So during the courses of my teaching them, I listen to them, and this is actually like maybe 40 to 50, in fact 60% always talk about how poor they are, why they have no hope, why they can't go on. So this has to change, actually. During the courses I'm teaching, I try my very best to let them change this mindset. Because calling yourselves like a maid, I have no capability, they're actually very intelligent and talented. They need to upgrade their skills through studying, taking lessons. A lot of them are free, even in Singapore. You can attend. You can go guitar lessons, or maybe do some crocheting, or probably taking photography. They could be livelihoods. And many of them are taking caregiving courses, which they find very important. And then the communication skills need to badly improve. I talk to them a lot. It's not just about speaking English. Communication skills covers a lot. And I'm happy to share that I'm a specialist in communication. Our OFWs here need further training on that, because to them, communication skills is just listening, and maybe that is what they have been told to by the employment agencies, but actually being assertive positively is good, so that the employers will understand, because Singapore is a different culture. I live here, I'm married to a Singapore man. There's culture in Singapore when it comes to work, it's business. Say it. Let's see what we can do about it. This is based on my experience, having been working in very big organizations where I am the boss, from the radio station to, in fact, an attraction, world-class attraction. I run and I manage and I deal with people. And being a Filipina would be challenging, but I never felt that. I felt we're all born equal, and that is coming from my understanding of the attitude issue. Okay, so we need to also improve the social media etiquette. A lot of our kababayans go online and talk about the misery. Well, there's nothing wrong if there is a forum on that. But please don't do it in a public setup where you are just heightening the stereotyping of our maids. They call them maids. They're suffering. To be honest with you, the relationship between employer and employee also takes both sides. So I'm not really with the employer alone. There are very, very problematic employers, but there's also the problem we have of our kababayans who may not be able to articulate it clearly, what they want and what they cannot do, because we have a very I don't know how to call it, a Filipino trait of patience and perseverance. Like, even if you cannot cope, you say, oh, I'll try, I'll do it, ma'am, I'll do it. No, if you really cannot tell them, I need rest, I want a break, I'm very sure, unless they cannot help you, then you can always go to the proper channels. Do the proper channels first and then make some actions. There's a lot of organizations that can help you. And think about empowerment and your family entrepreneurship. Instead of always giving money to your family members every month, maybe we have to start thinking of activities where they can start a livelihood. This is a challenge, and it is a tough one right now. Easier said than done. And I'm not pretending to be an expert. I'm saying, and I want to share this, that it has to start with, please learn to have a livelihood that can go through and save everybody in the difficult rainy days. It can happen because you yourself can lose your job once your employer is out of job, and then you have to look for another employer. And think charity also, which this is not a problem. Many of our kababayans here are very, very, very much immersed in doing charity, even if they're already overloaded. I want to call it myself, I call it sakapwa. This might be a very good program. I mean, I'm thinking, Sakapwa means it's for others, And it's just a simple slogan that I've thought about when I was thinking deeply, how you think we can contribute even more to our fellow Filipinos. We start home first, our kababayans. By the way, I don't just deal with Filipinos, I deal with a lot of Indonesians, and in projects that I do, mostly uplifting ones. And the last one is, please don't give all your money. Save some for yourself. You need to be empowered financially. So what I'm here for today is not just to name you organizations which can help you. There are plenty of them. The list is long. Every country has an ambassador or a diplomatic, source of information from your attaché or labor attaché. But that is not the point. The point is we easily can call these low-hanging fruits, where we ourselves can see that there are many things that we should begin with. And I think for me, number one really would be the breaking away from the usual self-pitying and victim complex. Because this victim complex is really powerful. You feel like, I can't learn the computer because I'm so poor in my home. Now you're given the opportunity. Pick up the phone, learn to answer it properly, learn to take notes. Everything you do is a learning curve. And I've been doing this philosophy for a long time in my life. And actually, on the contrary, I don't become a conduit for all the sufferings you have. I listen to it, but I want to give practical solutions. And I do deal a lot with OFWs. They call me like, oh, I need a job. They thought I'm an employment agency, which I'm not. But because I'm connected, I can refer them. So there are many ways we can help them. Talking is, in fact, the most important right now.
Yes, thank you very much, Pamela. That is good information and a lot of good background and advice that I hope people follow. I married, as you may know, a former maid from Singapore who I met. Finally, she passed her way to Canada, where we met, where she was also a maid, call it that. But yeah, lots of future, a lot of potential for all people if you go past this victim mindset and really move your life ahead. So thank you very much again, Pamela. Wild Heart. Really good. Okay, our next speaker to talk about OFWs and expat Filipinos is Irma Cosico. And probably no other person that I have met does work for OFWs across the Asia region. Singapore for many years, training people, both OFWs and their families, and not just Filipinos, but a broad range of OFWs from different countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, doing work there, Macau, and other places. So a very experienced person and an interesting person. So please welcome Irma Cosico, and glad to have you, Irma.
Thank you for inviting me, Richard, and of course, Rebecca Bustamante. Again, after 6 years, I'm back. But within those 6 years, I have been actively working with the same advocacy, and that is helping overseas Filipino workers in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Macau. My main strategy is customizing training courses for them, and at the same time, as much as possible, train all families in the Philippines. I want them to change their mindset that they can also become entrepreneurs and employers. So, and the last mile of every work that we do overseas is reunification, or reuniting with their respective families in the Philippines. Yes, so thank you for inviting me again, Richard. So for today, I will be speaking about the overseas Filipino workers as our more modern day heroes. Why are they called modern day heroes? The unsung heroes. And during the pandemic, much support was given to them by the government in terms of providing quarantine facilities and other medical assistance. But is that all that is needed by our OFWs? Support during times of calamities like COVID. So during the last year and this year, I was looking at other ways of helping our kababayans. And while I was doing already training and education on financial literacy and entrepreneurship, I thought that more should be done, not only by non-government organizations, but also by the government agencies and civil society. So for today, I will be focusing more on why are they called modern day heroes or unsung heroes. So as you can see, the remittance, I would focus on remittances. So when we look at the remittances, we only think of remittances, the use of remittances by the household. We should also think about the use of remittances by the country. So when we look at the household, what is the effect of remittances to the OFW families? Of course, it improves the standard of or the quality of life of OFW families. With the remittances, they're able to send their children to school, better schools. They're able to access basic social services, because even if there's free access, sometimes you have to pay for it. Education, medical assistance, and the like. And with proper training and education, they can also set up their own businesses or family enterprises while working abroad. And the other one is accessing insurance for the families. So these are some of the effects of the use of remittances by the OFWs and the families. When we look at the country, well, it is, already known that remittances are said to be saving us from serious economic recession. And second is the Philippines is one of the highest remittance receiving countries in the world. We are actually ranked fourth next to India, China, and the other one is India, China, and Mexico. Okay, so it's India, China, Mexico, and the Philippines in terms of the amount of remittances received by the labor sending countries, in our case, the Philippines. So when we look at the remittances, during the pandemic, many have already forecasted that remittances would go down and that it would affect our the growth of our gross domestic product and the gross national product. Even the central bank forecasted that 5%, there will be a 5% fall in the growth of the GDP, which later on they changed to 2%. But I will present later on that it did not happen. The remittances remain stable, and our overseas Filipino workers continued sending money to their families in the Philippines despite the pandemic. Not only in terms of frequency or the number of times that they're sending, but also in terms of volume, the amount of money that they're sending to their families. There are 12 million Filipinos working overseas. And when you look at these 12 million Filipinos, it means 12 million households receiving remittances from abroad. Okay, so when we look at the amount of remittances that flow in the country, as you can see, from 2018 to 2019, there was marked increase, significant increase in the volume of remittances received by the families and by the country. There's personal remittances. Personal remittances refer to those that have been transferred through platforms like remittance companies. There is cash remittances, and these are remittances that were deposited through commercial banks. So for example, in Singapore, these were those deposited in BDO, Philippine National Bank, BPI. These banks have offices in Singapore and also in Hong Kong and Macau. So these are the cash remittances that are referred to here. If you would notice in the table, from 2019 to 2020, 2020 is when there was pandemic. So before, BSP and the World Bank forecasted a 5% decline in growth of GNP and GDP. It did not happen. If you can see the difference between the remittances of 2018 and 2019, 2019 and 2020, there was only a 0.8% decline in the amount of and the volume of remittances received by the families and by the country during the pandemic. So despite the pandemic, the OFWs are able to send money back home, bigger in amount and more frequent. Okay, this means that for the country, while we were spending too much during the pandemics, this was balanced by the remittances received in the country. When we look at what are we doing for the OFWs before and during the pandemic? Before the pandemic, in the labor receiving countries, this refers to overseas. In the labor receiving countries, there are many non-government organizations, local and international, that are doing various programs and projects for the OFWs. For instance, in Singapore, there is Home, there's AIDA, there are other Filipino organizations giving training for OFWs. The training may not be free, some are giving it for free, but what's the effect of this training to our Filipino workers? We do not have evidences for that, but for our organization, ASCII Global, from 2010 to 2017, we were able to monitor the effect or the outcomes of the training to the overseas Filipino workers. From 2010 to 2017, we have trained about 7,000 overseas Filipino workers. The training was on financial literacy, communication, entrepreneurship, and personality development. And for each of the training, we measured the effects, qualitative effects of our training to the workers and their families back home. So we specifically noted the change in mindset and the way they do things and the way they deal with people. So when we look at the effect or the evidences of training to the lives of the Filipino workers and their families, for the Singapore OFWs, the effect was very significant. One is they were able to set up family enterprises. So while the OFWs working in Singapore, their families are starting to open enterprises and operate enterprises. And until this day, these enterprises are still there. So prior to the training, there was no family enterprise setup. Second is the OFWs also set up their own savings and investment club, independent of our organization. Some have invested in stocks, again, independent of our organization, but we're tracking it. Some are even able to invest in digital currencies, which until now, they are able to do it on their own independently. And the third one is families with large families, with unemployed brothers or sisters. They're able to operate their own family enterprises. The OFWs were able to set up a family enterprise for each of the unemployed workers. And we have names and evidences to what I am saying. In fact, one of them was cited as a best OFW entrepreneur from Cagayan province, and she was able to set up 5 family enterprises to be able to provide work or business for unemployed brothers and sisters. So that's the effect for the Singapore OFWs. When we look at the effect on this second organization that I have worked with, it's a different approach because the approach was more on the spiritual transformation. The organization believes that the OFWs should acknowledge that whatever resources that are there overseas do not belong to them. It belongs to God, and they should be responsible financial stewards. So with that objective, we have customized a training for them that would embrace both financial and entrepreneurial capabilities and at the same time, spiritual transformation. I worked with the various Christian churches in Hong Kong. And what's happening is after every service, I would sit down with the Filipino congregation and teach them basic financial management. And I call it financial stewardship. But when you look at it, it's more of a biblical finance, biblical finance. What I am stressing here is there is no blanket or one approach to training of OFWs and even their families. One has to be clear what is the objective before, rolling out a specific training or education program for the OFW. So for Hong Kong and Macau, it is very clear that we want spiritual transformation to happen. So all topics, all modules were laced with biblical principles. So the main foundation was really John 10:10. And if I may cite here, John 10:10 is the quote. To quote John 10:10, it's the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come to give you life and life to the full. So that's the biblical foundation, meaning to say they have to be wise and be responsible for the earnings that they make in their work abroad. So some of the objectives were, one, the OFWs in Hong Kong and Macau should be able to have their own savings club so or their own savings group, so that at the end of their contract, or if they want to go back home, they have something, they have funds to bring back home. And as of now, we have formed those savings group. Each of the churches would have specific savings group, maybe 3 to 5 savings group in a church. We work with 7 churches in Hong Kong and about 5 churches in Macau. The second objective is they should also be starting to think about setting up family enterprises. And some are able to set up their own family enterprises. And the third one, of course, is the spiritual transformation, realizing that this is all from someone up above, and they should be responsible stewards of whatever resources that are given or made available to them. What is noteworthy that I would want to share with you is that based on the feedback from the churches in Hong Kong, during the training ran for about 4 to 6 months. During the training was still ongoing, but the giving was increasing, the tithing. It was increasing, significantly increasing. Meaning to say, so they were asking me, what were you teaching, the students? But, there was really no conscious approach to tell them to increase their giving. So I attributed it to, a change in the way they look at things, or the change in mindset. And that's my advocacy, changing the mindset. So, so in that way, the remittances, with the proper training and education, customized training for families and workers abroad, we are able to achieve our objectives. This is about training and education. But is this all what is needed by our modern day heroes? As I go around these countries, I see them, every Sunday, and there are still some information that they need and that are obviously not there. What are these? Maybe other information that could be gathered from OWA or from POEA. I myself do not have this information. I come to these countries with a view that I am delivering the training to them, of course in consultation and in coordination or collaboration with the Philippine Embassy in those countries. But it seems that the OFW still need some information, where to go to in case they need this information. And what they're telling me is they're confused about the functions of each of the government agencies that they know. So what I would like to emphasize is, for OWA and for POEA and for the government in general, to enhance or to improve the pre and the post-departure orientation seminar. So giving all the information that is needed by the OFWs, and expanding further the financial. They're also giving financial literacy, but it's only for a matter of few hours. You cannot achieve your objective with a training that would only last 1 or 2 hours. So maybe the non-government organizations and the civil society that have training courses or educational programs for overseas Filipino workers and their families should need to work together to come up with one approach on helping, one approach or a unified approach in helping our overseas Filipino workers. In fact, the last organization that I worked with, we have started establishing an OFW help desk. In the idea or the plan is to have an OFW help desk in every municipality. But because of COVID, we were only able to establish 2 OFW help desks in Iloilo. We were also planning to launch this OFWs in distress can easily access services from OWA and POEA using this app. So, as you know, there are many cases of abuse happening abroad, but the OFWs would take about days, weeks, or months before they are able to go to the embassy. Unfortunately, with the pandemics, we were not able to expand this program and offer it to as many OFWs as possible. But one thing that we have made great accomplishment on before the pandemic is training the families of the seafarers in Iloilo. So when they came, because there were about 400,000 repatriated seafarers in the Philippines during the pandemic, some of them were from Iloilo. So hopefully, they were able to set up their own businesses because the families have started training on entrepreneurship. So my last word is for us concerned organizations and agencies in the Philippines to look at the possibility of unifying and coming up with one coordinated approach to helping our OFWs. We're grateful for the government in providing assistance during the pandemic, but after that, what will happen? So in the last 6 months, we have trained 6 batches of repatriated OFWs through the OWA Balik Kabayanihan program. So I am still mentoring and coaching some of them in setting up their own businesses. And I'm also blessed to know that government agencies like OWA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Science and Technology, Department of Trade and Industry, and Small Business Guarantee and Finance Corporation offered loan assistance from zero interest to very low interest rate to repatriated OFWs who will be able to set up their own businesses. And the requirement is there should be a mentor and a business plan that go with the loan application. And that's what we are doing at the moment. So, I mean, efforts like this, I mean, the government should look at expanding programs like the Balik Kabayanihan program. And more importantly, look at other aspects so that our modern day heroes or the unsung heroes are really protected, cared for, and served very well. We know that their remittances, is saving us from serious economic depression. So thank you very much for this time. Thank you very much for Asia CEO organization for caring for the OFWs by setting up this forum so that our voices would also be heard by other like-minded organizations and agencies in the Philippines and maybe outside the country. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Irma Cosico. We'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Thank you again.
Thank you, Richard.
And for our final speaker of this event, we are very pleased to welcome Secretary Abdullah Mamao, the Presidential Advisor on Overseas Foreign Workers to this government. Secretary Abdullah, he's a close confidant of President Duterte. He was called back by his friends and classmates all the way back from the United States, that he returned where he was living very comfortably to be part of this administration. And he has done a lot of work. Reports are he's one of the most busiest secretaries in the government. He has helped with many tense situations, repatriating thousands of Filipinos stranded in Saudi Arabia, tense situations in Kuwait, Libya, Qatar, and other places, and really done a lot looking after the millions of Filipinos who work and send their money home to the nation. So really pleased to have him. Please welcome Secretary Abdullah Mamao, Presidential Advisor on OFWs. So glad to have you with us, Secretary Abdullah.
Yeah, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much, Richard, for that introduction. And I am glad that my good friend Yusik designate Edwin Bile is also with us. He can say a lot of things about what our office has been doing in the past several years. We started in 2016, and it's now 2021, and we are still continuing that responsibilities entrusted to us by the Office of the President. Although we are only an advisory office, but we have, in effect, revolved into an action office anyway, because many of the requests addressed to the President for assistance by OFWs worldwide were all endorsed to us by the Office of the President. There were also direct referrals sent to us, and there were also personal contacts of OFWs and other Filipino who are involved in situations on foreign countries. And our office has been assisting all these Filipino families and overseas workers who have been visiting our office for the last 5 years. By the way, Richard, in Malacanang, I would like to say this as one thing that will encourage overseas Filipino workers and other members of their families who want to seek assistance to our office, that our office in Malacanang is open to everyone. One doesn't need any appointment to visit our office. They can come anytime. And we had been assisting our OFWs in other in foreign countries, and also their families who are visiting our office. And for the last 5 years, we had done, as I said, a lot of things, solving the repatriation of Philippine workers in the Gulf states, especially. As I mentioned earlier, we have these problems of the 11,000 stranded Philippine workers in Saudi Arabia. And we were then fortunate that we got all the support of the Saudi government. They were provided accommodations while waiting for their repatriation to the Philippines. And they were given, provided with foods, everything, Wi-Fi in the camps where they were then staying at the time, and in different parts of the kingdom where they were given accommodations. One of those things that helped them also is the waiver of all penalties of all these 11,000 stranded Philippine workers that helped in their repatriation to the country. And there was this very problematic group of Filipino workers in Alcobar in the eastern province. There was then a problem of their repatriation because they did not want to go back to the country. And fortunately, after I was able to talk to them, all these almost 300 Filipino workers stranded at the time decided to go back to the country. Now, we have gone into very critical missions to Libya. There was this incident of kidnapping of 3 Filipino engineers, and that was at the height of the civil war in Tripoli, Libya. And we went there. I was accompanied by the current ambassador of the Philippines to Kuwait, Ambassador Lomondod, and we were stuck in Libya for more than 10 days because there was no airplane going back to Tunisia. But we then decided to stay and made the necessary negotiations with the officials of the Tripoli government. And we were then working with the representatives of the South Korean government, because one of their engineers also was kidnapped at the time. And fortunately, with the assistance of the UE government, these three Filipino engineers were flown back from Libya to the United Arab Emirates and then back to the Philippines. There was also this problem of the 7 crewmen of a Greek oil tanker, who were then accused of smuggling in Libya. And it was at the height also of the civil war in Libya when we started negotiating for their release, for their acquittal of the charges against them. And fortunately, the Department of Justice helped in the acquittal of these 7 sailors at the time. And there was, you remember about, as I said, about this problem of the diplomatic crisis in Kuwait at the time in 2018. And fortunately, with the participation of our office, that friendly diplomatic and labor relations between the state of Kuwait and the Philippines was restored. So when also when we had this problem of the impending war between Iran and America, we were sent to the different countries in the Middle East, including countries outside the Middle East, and that was Turkey, Turkey and Iran, and we were able to get the assurances of the governments of Iraq, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait, that in the event of a war between Iran and America at the time, they assured us that they will provide the logistics and the support for the evacuation of our Philippine workers in their respective countries. That was then one very important mission that we had done. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic that happened in the early part of 2020, we were not able to proceed to Lebanon, to Damascus, to Jordan, to Oman, and Saudi Arabia. That was the last leg of our travel, and we were not able then to go to these countries because of the pandemic. Now, during all these years that we had been fighting for one promise of the President, commitment of the President for the creation of the Department for Overseas Filipino Workers. Our office has been very, very active in deliberations in Congress and in attending to meetings of different organizations, overseas Filipino workers organizations, encouraging them to support the passage of this Department for Overseas Filipino Workers. It is now pending in the House of the Senate. It is one of the priority bills submitted by the President, and hopefully, if the House of the Senate will approve this proposed legislation, there is a very good chance that it might be created into law before the end of the year. This is one department that should really be created. We had experience in the past about one activity that had not been attended to because of lack of focus as far as the handling of the relations of our country to other foreign countries. One instance was the meeting that was not held between the United Arab Emirates government and that of the Philippine government on the problems affecting problems affecting domestic workers in the United Arab Emirates. Now, That happened in 2014. In 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. In other words, this problem of lack of labor agreement between the Philippine government and the United Arab Emirates was in limbo for 7 years. And with the participation of our office, after meeting with the Minister of Labor of the United Arab Emirates, the joint committee meeting of the Ministry of Labor in Kuwait, in United Arab Emirates, that of the Philippines, was organized and held in February of 2021. And in March 2021, the agreement was signed between the United Arab Emirates government and that of the Philippine government. So there is now an expansion of labor migration to the United Arab Emirates because of the agreement that was then signed between the Philippine government and United Arab Emirates. So these are just some of the examples where a department created to focus on the concerns of the overseas Philippine workers in this country is really one thing that should be done, should be achieved in order that all the problems of the overseas Philippine workers worldwide should be attended to with focus and with efficiency and effectiveness because of the sole responsibility that is given to that department, and that is to attend to the needs of the overseas Philippine workers worldwide. So thank you very much, Richard. I am open for any further question as far as this proposed legislation is concerned. And USIC designate Edwin Bile can see something about the responsibilities of our office and the future of this department that is going to be created by Congress, because USIC designate Bile had been involved actively in committee hearings in Congress and in international forum regarding this particular legislation. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you too, Secretary. And yes, we welcome Undersecretary Edwin Bale. And maybe he can, but I have some questions, certainly, but maybe we'll let the Undersecretary speak first. Please go ahead, sir, and happy birthday today to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary and Mr. Richard Mills, for this wonderful program by which our office, under Secretary Mamao, can share important things about the functions of the office and the probabilities of working together under the office of the President. Essentially, it's a policy recommending office that submits recommendations to the President as issues arise affecting overseas Filipino workers. And one of the main political programs or platforms of the President when he ran in 2016 was the establishment of a new department to focus on the problems of distressed Filipinos abroad, principally overseas Filipino workers. This department, rather the draft legislation for this department, has been done by the House of Representatives, and it is at the stage of plenary discussions by the Senate. We are hoping that the law will be passed before this term ends. Essentially, the purpose of the department is to consolidate and merge all the government agencies involved in providing services to overseas Filipinos, especially the workers. So we'll have the POEA, the DFA, the social welfare. All these agencies are brought together to form the new department. In effect, it is a small slice of our foreign policy and diplomacy to focus on overseas Filipinos with particular attention to overseas Filipino workers. So the aim is to provide speedy and effective responses to the problems of our peoples abroad. The policy problem was that under the old law, Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipino Act as amended, the functions to attend, rather the objectives and the responsibilities for attending to Filipinos abroad was dispersed. They were dispersed to so many agencies. So sometimes there is some kind of volleyball of responsibilities. So to avoid this and the accompanying delay in responding to our people, this new department was conceived by the president so that it can respond quickly. Broadly, it will save the Foreign Affairs Department from the heavy burden of having to attend to workers' problems. It will save the Department of Labor from attending to overseas issues and focus on full employment and full protection inside. Whereas the DFA will be able to focus on economic diplomacy, political security diplomacy. So this one, attending to the problems of Filipinos, will be handled by this department. I think that should be enough sharing, Richard, and thank you again.
Okay, well, that sounds very interesting. And I can tell you, some of you watching would know that I am married to a Filipina OFW who was a maid in Singapore and before a maid in Canada, where I met her. And I know I myself experienced a lot of her difficulty. Her and her friends had numerous times where someone would have to take a day off work, stand in line, only to be told that they're in the wrong department for documentation or whatever it was they're looking for. And I myself got involved in some of this. So what you're saying with this new department, this should solve these problems so people will be able to go to a one-stop shop type service. Is that the purpose?
That is the intention,
okay,
Richard, because if you...
It's very needed, yes.
As the Secretary has narrated before, we went to so many places in the Middle East. One of the things we did was to visit the places where our distressed Filipinos are housed temporarily before being repatriated. Some of them were willing victims in illegal recruitment. So we asked them, what is it that the government should have done so that you will not go into this dangerous thing of becoming willing? The answer was uniform in so many places: employment. So it is a broad economic, political situation where our people, feeling that the needed level of employment is not available at home and it being available abroad, will avail of the opportunities abroad. However, there are many opportunists, people who take advantage of these desires, and thus they want to make money out of it, and our people want to be able to go out to be able to work, and that's where problems come in.
I see. Okay. Well, it's very exciting. I think it's been needed for years, and I'm glad you guys are working on it. So best of luck to you. But can you tell us, I know you were involved in some very tense situations. Libya, where you were stranded and there was a civil war going on with the Iran general was killed by American forces, and it was a pretty tense situation. And we all wondered whether 3 million Filipinos would have to be returned to the Philippines. But how do you deal with that kind of thing? I mean, they're tense situations. I mean, in Libya, were you afraid of things happening to you, or how do you? Can you tell us some stories about this that would get us all excited? Sounds exciting.
Richard, this is one example of the concern of our president to the OFWs worldwide. We were then talking about 3 Filipino kidnapped in Libya, in Tripoli, Libya. But despite the existence of a civil war at the time in Tripoli, the president decided to send us to Tripoli. I would like to say something about this because it was not an easy job for us to decide to enter into Libya at the time, because there was a civil war, and when we were taking our breakfast in the hotel we were then staying at the time, we could see the exchange of mortar fires between the militias and the members of the Tripoli armed forces at the time. When we arrived in Tripoli at the airport, we were escorted by more than 20 police cars at the time from the airport to our hotel, because there was really danger in traveling from the airport to the hotel. And it would have been an embarrassing situation for the Tripoli government if representatives of a foreign government will be kidnapped by the militias at the time. On my part, I would like to say this, that it is not that I was not afraid, but when we entered Tripoli and stayed in Tripoli, I was then thinking at the time that, being a Muslim, maybe if I will be kidnapped by any of these forces at the time. So that was then my frame of mind when I was in Libya. And we were stuck in Libya for more than 10 days because there was no plane. And our return to Tunis, the capital of Tunisia. So because of that situation, we were forced to take the land route from Tripoli to the border of Tunisia. And I think there were about 29 or more than 30 checkpoints that we had gone through before reaching the border of Libya and Tunisia. So that was how critical was the situation was. And when we went back to negotiate again with for the release of the 7 sailors, employed with this Greek oil tanker company. It was then at the time when the forces of General Haftar were entering the borders of Tripoli. So when we reached Tripoli at the time, we had to go back and took the same plane at the time, because that would have been the last plane going out of Tripoli, Libya. We were told that if we would not take the plane with the 7 sailors acquitted and released by the Libyan government, we will not be able to go out of Libya by air transport. So we will have to take again the land route, which was then very dangerous because the forces of General Haftar were already in the perimeter of Tripoli. And that really, some of those dangers that we had to face in looking and in attending to the problems of our overseas Philippine workers. We were concerned about 3 Filipino engineers kidnapped by the militias. We were concerned about the 7 sailors detained in one of the jails in Tripoli. So it did not matter for the president If it involves only one worker, two workers, three workers, he would do something. He would do something to attend to this problem. And that's how the president loved the overseas Filipino workers worldwide. It was a concern that we have to, do something that involves risk on government officials. Because when we reached, we went to Tripoli, I was only accompanied by the current ambassador of the Philippines to Kuwait. And fortunately, we had gone out of Libya unharmed, and we succeeded also in the release of, with the cooperation and participation of the South Korean government for the release of the 3 Filipino engineers and the 7 sailors at the time who were detained in Libya for more than 2 years. Now, when we were then planning to go to Tehran, at the time when after the assassination of General Soleimani, the president was concerned about the plight of the Filipino workers, overseas Filipino workers based in Tehran. Although there were only more than 2,000 Filipino workers in Tehran, the president decided to send us to Tehran. And it was not an easy thing to handle because we were then afraid that if our plane will reach, close to an area to the airport in Tehran, we might be shot by any of the forces there in Tehran. Yes. And that was at the time when this Ukrainian Airlines was shut down after taking off from the international airport in Tehran. And that was the time also when the Iranian sent missiles to the military camp of the United States in Baghdad. There were some members of the U.S. military, who were then injured in that 12 missile bombing from Iran to Baghdad. The reason why we were sent to these Middle East countries to talk with the leaders of these countries was because of the danger that if there will be war between Iran and America, all the business interests of America will be affected. And we are talking about oil companies operating in the Gulf states. You could just imagine if all the Gulf states will be on fire, when all these oil companies will be attacked by forces fighting against the government of the United States. And I think this is one thing that, in my observation, that maybe this pandemic had really stopped the World War III, because I was then thinking that if this pandemic did not happen, there might have been a continuing friction between Iran and the United States of America. So these were some of the dangers that we had to face as government officials. And also at one time, when we were coming from Tunisia, we were not able to take the plane. There was no plane. At one time, when we went to Libya, we had to travel for 13 hours. And traveling during nighttime, you could not see any houses nearby. It was dark in all these places that we had reached at the time. And people staying in many parts of these areas that we traveled from Tunis to Libya. And it took us more than 10 hours, approximately 13 hours to reach the border of Libya and Tunisia. But we were doing this because of the responsibility assigned to us. And that is why, in my view, Richard, this department really should be created so that it can continue the same kind of thing, to focus on the interest and the welfare of the overseas Filipino workers worldwide. I was then assigned to do this kind of critical and dangerous assignment, maybe because I carry the name of OFWs, my advisory function, as the presidential advisor of the president. So we were forced then, and we had this courage and determination to go to places where other people are afraid to go, because at that time there was this impending war between Iran and the United States, and going to Tehran at that time was one very dangerous kind of mission. And entering a country at the height of a civil war was another thing. And entering the country at the time when the two governments, the Benghazi government and the Tripoli government of Libya, were then at war at the time. So, by the grace of the Almighty God, we were then spared of any danger to our lives, and we were able to accomplish the mission unscattered, Richard. So it was the blessings of the Almighty God that really protected us during these critical missions that were assigned to us by the office of the President.
Yes. Well, anybody, if you want to go online sometime, people listening, but just look at videos of what it was like during that time. It was civil war. And you guys put yourselves at risk by doing this. So, and other tense situations in Kuwait and on and on. So, yeah, well done to you and your group, Under Secretary Edwin and Secretary Abdullah, and wish you really well on this creation of the new OFW department, because it really is needed. From my own experience, I have seen it, how difficult it is for, you know, average Filipinos to really understand where they're supposed to go. It really is a challenge. And so, yeah, so best of luck on that. I've always felt it was long overdue. So, yeah, so keep up the great work. I know you're coming down to the end, so hopefully you can get it in. But thank you again, both of you, for being with us today, and best of luck. Yes, thank you again, Under Secretary. I'm glad you're with us. And also, we spent some time getting to know Secretary Abdullah and his wife, and we're really, really pleased to hear the work that they had done over the years. So thank you again to both, and have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. Welcome to the engaging Q&A session for this version of Asia CEO Forum. We are talking about expatriate Filipinos, and we have some just wonderful special guests from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from the UAE, some of the key markets certainly for that receive our Filipinos. So maybe if I can ask a first kind of a light question to start off, but I mean, all of you have worked with a lot of Filipinos, you've met them and been expatriates yourself. What advice, let's say the top 2 tips that you would give to people who are either already working offshore or thinking about doing so? Who'd like to go first? Well, I know Pamela Welder, this is something that she is passionate about this. So Pamela, what advice would you give?
Okay, I have, you wanted to, I have 20 or more.
I know.
I'll just do two. I'll do two. Mabuhay. Mabuhay means a warm welcome from, of course, I have a Filipino heart, despite the blondiness. Okay, I live in Singapore for quite a long time, and I've traveled in many other countries too, traveling, performing. So I have a very good experience of understanding our Filipino culture and how it works in different countries and circumstances. Well, from Singapore, I think wherever you are, whether you are in Singapore or any part of the world, one of the most important thing is come armed with knowledge, whatever job you want to do. Okay, that is one of the best advice I think is important. Example, you want to work as an executive, be armed with the knowledge and more, in fact. Grow. Or the second one, if you want to work as an OFW, armed with the knowledge. Know that you're expected to cook, you're expected to take care of children and ask questions. So this is the first tip I want to give anyone for any job, whatever job, and especially entering a foreign country where their culture may be different. So the first one is armed with knowledge. And the second one is making sure that you understand the expectations of your employer or whoever you work with. And I'm not addressing just professionals. I want to address the OFWs as well. Okay, culturally, Filipinos to Singaporeans, what's different? Or probably Filipinos because Filipinos in the Philippines and Filipinos who live very long in maybe UAE may be different in their viewpoints. Or there are those who have traveled a lot and working in the health industry. So it's a very wide scope, but first know what is it? And these are the two things first I want to begin with. Myself, that I know what I can bring to the table. These two will be really important to me if I'm going to work.
Okay, very good. Roby, what about you? What do you, in the UAE, what advice would you give to people?
Yeah, be armed with knowledge. I think that's very important. And you don't go to the battle without understanding what you're going to be into. One important thing that you should be understanding too, as you know, if you are planning to move to outside of the Philippines, is to understand the culture that where you're going to. Especially here, this is a Muslim country. Culture is very much different from where we were before, and it's not just about the religion, but specifically in the culture itself. Although UAE is very much open in terms of exploring other cultures as well, but it doesn't mean that we let go of their own culture. So if you want to work here, understand how they work as well, understand how they mingle with people, understand how they would want to be working with you as an expat. That's it, Richard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good advice. Irma, what do you say in your experience in the region?
The same as Pam said, Robbie, except that, most important for me is having a plan, or a purpose. You're going abroad for sure to work, but work for what? Yeah. So, and then let this plan be shared with the family. It's important that it's not your own personal decision, but the family is involved. So, and then the second advice is come prepared not only based on your skills and knowledge, but be prepared emotionally and spiritually. So, because overseas work is no joke. You have to be ready to face challenges, problems, trials, because without being prepared for that and being determined to finish, for example, the contract, what would happen to the sacrifices that you have made already before departing your country? So just those two tips, Richard, have a plan or a purpose. And then second is involve the family in that plan so that, this becomes a family endeavor, a family effort. So at the end of the day, overseas Filipino workers need the support of the family back home, not only emotionally and spiritually, but more importantly, financially. Thank you.
Okay, good advice. And now, Pastor Ray, you deal with all kinds of issues and problems, but hopefully a lot of good things too. But what advice would you give?
I think one of the best things that I would say to our like upcoming OFWs or expats is to really talk together with their family. Just like Irma's mentioned, this is really very strong. It's also a point that I really want to really to share to everyone that having preparing your family that you'll be leaving, let's say for 2 years or 4 years, I think we need to give them like the for them to ask counseling, I think from other people that have experienced already, so that the family and the whole family can know or will know the consequences or the things that they could face. Because again, like Mr. Irma has mentioned, like this is involved the family. And those are, I think, preparations for the family, going to counseling, the details of like the ups and downs that they may face, the problems, the consequences could be. I think if they are prepared for this, I think our OFW that were working overseas will also be happy and can enjoy also working abroad. Because when you work here in your family, you leave the family not have that support, or they demand you so many things, bring us money, send us money, and they could not, if they don't know that the money that they make here is not that easy, and just ask them to send, and that's really put a very high like demands on our Kababayans that will be working. So that's one part. Preparation to counseling with the family, talks together with the family, making good plans, just like Irma has mentioned. And also here, I think one of the things, like one of the things they can advise to them is, I think they need to find spiritual homes. Why? Because here we help them to, when they have problems, small problems, we're here to pray for them, give them guidance, we give them practical help. And those people that basically got into trouble, like committed themselves into problems more or committing suicide, because these people, they don't have any spiritual homes. They don't have a family that cares for them. But when they are outside and they have a so-called Christian home or family here that cares for them, that could really help them overcome the challenges, because working abroad is very challenging. And you need help here, not only help for your family. The problem is sometimes we have troubles back home and they don't have help here, and they go for the wrong help. That's why they end up making a decision that is not wrong. I mean, that is wrong. Sorry, that is wrong. So that I think the best is like when they come or work anywhere in the world, find a spiritual homes or a family or a community that can really help and guide and lead into better things that they can have.
Yes, and thankfully Filipinos will often seek out churches like yours, I guess, Ray. So that's a good Filipino attribute. But now Irma and Ray have both talked about managing expectations for families. And I know my wife and I, we've been heartbroken over the years, people working many, many years and then have nothing. And not only do they have nothing, but their family has nothing because they've sent all the money.
Yeah.
The money gets spent. What advice would you give to people on managing expectations for the family? Now, Irma, you mentioned financial. I do emphasize that word. What do you think?
Yeah.
About that?
Yeah, so this is an actual experience. When I interviewed most of our students in Singapore, most of them are sending their money, I mean, their salaries, 100% of it back home. And when they also complained that every month, every occasion, there seems to be emergency. Yeah, like they have to send money. Yeah, so when a contract is suddenly finished or terminated, or when they get sick, they go back home with nothing because the family is used to receiving 100% of their salaries and spending all of it. So, in fact, after 2-3 weeks, they call the OFW and ask for more money because they are not able to pay for utilities, when in fact, part of what they have said is supposed to cover utilities. So, that's when we thought about doing a back-to-back training the overseas Filipino workers and also their families in the Philippines. First of all, the family should know and should accept the fact that overseas work is not permanent. Anything can happen anytime. So they should be prepared for that. And Richard, I have proven that it takes really the right education, or let's say it's a customized training for these families to realize it may take quite a while, like not immediately or instantly, but there will come a time that they will realize that it's important that they save also. So I said financial, I mean the families need to support the OFWs financially. What I meant there is they should understand that they should also be able to save part of what the workers are sending to them. Yeah. So learn to save, because when you talk to the families, they have no savings, but they have investment. Investment in what? Furnitures, appliances, renovation of the homes, or but these are non-productive investment. So that's what I mean. The workers keep on sending because it's their way of coping for their absence, or so they're or not, let's say they feel guilty that they're not there all the time, to be with the family. So they think that by sending more money back home, it covers for everything. So so I think both ways expectations should be managed. Even the workers, they should also be saving for themselves, because at the end of the day, they're working hard, but they have no money. So everything is sent to the family.
Yeah. Now, Pamela, you have a very assertive personality and excellent communication skills.
Thank
you. I'm sure you could manage expectations, but other people maybe don't have the same assertiveness and communications you have. So how do you advise them to manage their family expectations?
I think managing family expectations and being assertive, there are things that you can learn. It's not like I learned it through, but I have been trained by my family. My family was always teaching me things. My late parents, they're both already somewhere in paradise. They have always, told us that, you have to look at it in such a way that the family is actually a pillar of strength, but God is the foundation. So I'm not the kind, I don't work in a church or anything, but I contribute. But what I'm saying is that the idea alone of learning assertiveness is not just through one-time experience. You come to Singapore and suddenly you're assertive. You need to go for training. You need to be learning from icons. You can talk to your pastor. It could be learned from the church, from the people you meet. So it's actually mixing or getting acquainted, or mixing is the right word, or meeting the right people. So one of them that you can learn is through the right people. That's very important. It influences you and it changes you. So there are two things I wish to share based on this, aside from the expectations of families and all, that we also talk, I wish to talk very quickly about the vicious cycle we're in. It's like, it's always giving money, and the family is always asking money and asking money. Somehow you need to start initiative by thinking, what business can we do? I like the idea when Miss Cosico said that, yes, but what business? This business itself must also be agreed by the foreign worker in Singapore. Not that your father keeps investing in things that they don't have much know-how, or probably it's a teamwork. And you need to make sure that it will have returns. Because a lot of people in the Philippines say, oh, come on, invest, give us your money. And then it's gone. The person has actually started the business, run away with your money. And that is hard-earned money. So that to me should be managed by both. It can only come from training. It can only come from education. It's not like it comes off like somebody is telling you. You have to learn it the hard way. Another one would be this attitude of many of our kababayans, and it's not only for Filipinos, but living it to God. Okay? This is important. God is a very divine being. You don't have, I'm not going to be preaching about God. I believe in God for sure, but I don't want people to use God's time all the time. God has very important projects to do. I mean, I always think of this, dear God, Jesus, I pray to you in a very brief sentence. I need your strength and give me wisdom, period. I don't really want to have a long list, because the long list is just a lazy way to get things done. This is my view. And my sister always is very religious, tells me, don't do that. God has time for you. God has time for so many people who may be needing it more than me. This is my viewpoint. So please don't keep saying God will take care of our finances. God will take care. You got to give God a chance to help others, but you need to help yourself first. Be educated, okay? Learn. The right company is important. Like I think Pastor Ray, that is correct. Meet the right people. Have a strong pillar, people, the right people, not people indulging in drugs. Sorry, I'll use the word prostitution. Probably crimes. All kinds of crimes. There are many cases I hear. It's just quite shocking. You see this person who comes from the province, who comes here, so sweet. But I used to see a neighbor and I was shocked. Her hairstyle changed totally. I was shocked. And she was talking to me, hi, yeah. And when I first saw her, she used to be eating from my kitchen because she wasn't having the right employer. And I was just being helpful to her. And I lost track of her. And then suddenly I saw the tremendous change. The next thing I knew, she has gone into, prostitution. So to me, you have to have the right people. Sometimes you are not lucky. And I'm sad to say that. So we must, if we are educated, we are better privileged. I think we are not trying to be heroes, but we need to extend our octopus hands. We must, if we are more privileged, give more without expecting anything. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't hug the limelight. Thank you.
Roby, now you deal with a lot of, well, Ray, go ahead then. Ray?
Yeah, we're talking about the expectations. The main problem that we have as Filipinos, because, I'm going abroad, so I will borrow money. Some of our family already used up the money that they haven't received yet. So I think this is one part of our culture that we have to manage well. Because, not because I'm going to go abroad, and, there's many things that we have to spend as well. So sometimes, if we take advantage of the salary that we have, like by borrowing, loaning, I think this is one thing. So I would like to really emphasize this to our kababayans. Please avoid this kind of things. This is one way to manage things that you have in your family. If you can avoid taking your money advance, like loaning money or borrowing money, because you're expecting that you will be receiving an amount and you will pay. But the problem is when you receive the money, then you have another expenses. So that's why we got into trouble. So I think if you can manage this kind of things, and those things that ahead, I think can be avoided. Troubles ahead when it comes to finances, because the main things why we are going abroad is literally to help our family to get better. But the sad is to say that it's some of our kababayans that go abroad but go home broke and disappointed and hurt, and families destroyed. So I think this is one thing I think that I would emphasize. And I agree with Pamela says that, God is there, but we have to do our job. The Lord says, if you are lazy, don't eat. So you have to work. You have to work because...
Okay, good advice.
Richard, I promise it will only be 1 minute. Because it was coming from Miss Irma Kusika when she said that there's education needed, not only here in Singapore or any country, but also from home. There must be a master's of going abroad or international course where the family, that is really so meaningful to me, have to be educated. Why is it that I'm saying that? Many of them has this imported mentality. I want to buy an electric fan, but I only want it from Singapore because it's imported. But actually, you can buy it in the Philippines. I want this. This food is imported. So when you go home, you don't have anything. So they're expecting, aside from the cash, the goods. So you have to end up hiding from all of them. There's too many of them asking gifts. The whole town. This is to really stop somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was 1 minute.
So, good. And now, Roby, in UAE, you work with professionals because you're a professional yourself. But what advice do they also have these problems, or even do they have more than others? But what's your experience there, and what advice would you have, Roby?
Okay. Yes, it's pretty much the same, Richard, here. Same problem. Managing expectations of the family way back in the Philippines it's very common amongst OFWs. I myself am a product of of the generation of seaman parent. Okay, so that generation where when your father comes back home and he gives a lot to the neighbors, here and there. I'm a product of that. So I see these things happening without being, nothing left is for us as for the family actually, because it's distributed amongst the neighbors, the relatives. So having seen that kind of environment growing up, so I realized maybe I should change a bit in terms of probably managing my finances. And I'm no good in financial literacy, Richard, but we are so happy that in UAE there's a lot of financial literacy program for OFWs, and that helps us actually realize and understand how to cope with the finances, with the minimum salary that we are receiving here. How do we manage to distribute that in our expenses here? The cost of living here is very expensive. These things has to be informed to the families in the Philippines that this is what I'm receiving, this is what I'm supposed to be giving to my landlord, to the other expenses, and this is what is for you. So it's going to be easier. I know it's easier said than done, but somehow you have to start from that. Now that you have to tell your family that this is the only thing I can give to you, so that you leave something for yourself. You leave something for yourself. You don't rely on what you have shared to the family, because the reality is once you go back home, whatever you gave to them is already gone. It's spent somewhere else. Yes. So you start saving for yourself. Prioritize your immediate family, because that is what is important. Prioritize the education, because in the long run, that is for OFWs that is, I think, the most important thing to do. Prioritize the education of your kids. Okay, if you are single, if you have committed to your sisters and brothers that you will be educating their kids, then prioritize that. You spend on the most important thing in the context of family, helping the family.
I think it's very important. I don't just come in, but I want to relate to the topic that you just said. There's something we seem to forget. It's not just about the cash or the financial issues that we keep being worried about from our family members. There's also family members that need to be educated in understanding and respecting working hours. So they keep calling you like, hey, what happened? Oh my gosh, the car is broken down. There's no more gasoline. And then they call you. Oh my goodness, they're all piling up. And in the course of my teaching students for enrichment programs, Filipinos for stress management, I noticed they get stressed because every time there is a phone call, it could either be cash, it could be stories like, oh my goodness, mommy fell down from the guava tree. Oh my goodness. Oh, auntie broke, she broke her leg when she opened the door. Or there was something, a tree fell in it. And these are all stress factors. And you can just imagine the whole day, this poor OFW in Singapore will not be able to concentrate in their work. And then the next minute, hello, everything is fine. Okay, everything is like, so the feeling of this is not just financial. It's it's like a merry-go-round. It's like a carousel. It's like going up and down. And I can just really pity them when they tell me the stories. I feel pain seeing them, whether to accept the phone call or not. And that's why I wrote the song Telepono. I don't know whether it was shared to you, where I talk about Filipinos calling you all the time. You don't know, or family members, whether you'd be happy or not. So I'm just sharing this experience. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and maybe a last quick question, but government services. Government, I see people do try their best. They want Filipinos to be happy and looked after overseas. But what might be improvements or not? What have you heard? I know my wife and I over the years, with her friends who are maids, nannies, caregivers, and so forth, they have a difficult time maneuvering government services when abroad for different reasons. But who'd like to go first here? We don't want to be political.
Okay, give it to Pastor.
Maybe I'll let Ray. Go ahead, Ray. What do you think?
Okay, I just asked some of our people here in Hong Kong, and one of the main concerns that they have actually, first is the long hours of work here, which is not being implemented by the labor. Our government has a way to ask the government, like the Hong Kong government, hey, you have to implement this one. That's one thing. Number two is the food allowance. Because in the contract, every people that work here, they have like the so-called like food allowance. But that food allowance is not being given to them by the employers. Because some of the employers said, oh, you're already eating in my home, so why do you have to give the food allowance? But the thing is, the food that they eat sometimes is not the food that we eat. So this is one of their complaints. So one of the concerns that they have, if our government can really push the labor or the Hong Kong government to really implement this food allowance and really give it to our helper, to our kababayans OFW, I think that will really be a good thing. And this is one of the things that they really brought me up. The long hours work, which is some of them works for 18 hours. They start at 6 o'clock and then they finish at 11 o'clock. You know, this is too much. So another thing is our government, like the labor here in Hong Kong, like from the Philippines, I think hope can look into this, that they can implement the long hours work that should be maybe 12 hours, maybe it's okay, acceptable, 12 hours. And also the food allowance that they sign on the contract, but it is not really given to them. And that is really like heartbroken to them because they have this food allowance, but my employer is not giving this to me. But our government has no way to implement that, to force the employer to give this allowance to them. So those are very, very major concerns that they really brought me up.
Okay. Pamela, what do you think?
Sure. I think I understand that there were people in many years ago who actually experienced some difficulties when you are working in a country overseas, but so much has changed actually in Singapore, and I did share that in many articles, and also from my checking in and learning more about employability, and even talking to my own general manager of foreign affairs at home, my OFW at home, and all her friends and the people I meet. I mean, especially the Singapore government is getting more active with participation, like such things as a rest day. You know, when you're having a rest day in the COVID times, they actually have a problem. You are resting in your employer's house, so they can easily call you, like, Anita, sorry, I'm just using an example. Anita, since you're already here, help me sweep the floor. And it actually is your day off. And this has to be really followed to a T, because right now the Singapore government will be introducing this, that there should be at least one day off, which is not to be compensated by money. The rest may be, but not one solid rest day. You do not disturb your OFW, let them have a rest, because this is needed by our OFWs. And there's also a check on health, the BMI check on the body, whether they have been abused or anything, because they won't be telling you when their employers are around. And that the government here is doing that now, and they're going to be calling your OFWs with or without you. And this is our new developments implemented soon in 2022. And there will be centers where the OFW can approach and go there. So I think for me, this is a very important thing that is growing. And I think one of the things I want to highlight that should be improved is that many employers should be partners in the education of the enrichment education of their OFWs. Some employers do not want their OFWs to learn. Although, to be honest, I have some students where their employers are the ones spending for their upliftment, like learning computers, sewing, clothing, or anything, or caregiving. But majority still are very careful because it affects the time. Like, are you sure? So I think there should be more emphasis on that the educating your OFWs is actually good for the family. It's good for you to gather. It should be a partnership between employer and the employee. So
Yes.
I won't occupy the whole time. Thank you.
Roby, what do you see in UAE there?
I honestly speaking, I really cannot relate when we're gonna be talking about the household workers, right? But I remember 2 years back in Polo office, there were about 300 wards staying in that office, and these are the situations happened because these are runaways and undocumented. So with that number of wards staying in the labor office for maximum of 3 months probably is a huge number, and the government can do so much. It's really proper that you plan to move out of the Philippines for this kind of work. Probably you should be documented. You should pass through POEA, OWA, because once you arrive here and you fall into the arms of illegal recruiter, then there's no way for you to be helped. You just have to run to the Polo office and ask for their assistance. And this assistance will not be coming from the government itself. So some would be coming from the private sectors as well. So it's important probably that you arm yourself with the knowledge that once you reach other countries for that kind of work, you should be knowledgeable of what you're getting into, like what's your right as an employer. Here in UAE, in the professional sector, it's regulated. The UAE labor law is very much enforced here, and our contract passes through the government. So there's no way that the employers, will abuse us. Okay, I believe for the documented household workers also, their contract passes through the labor office, I think, and that in a way protects them. Okay. However, for those who are not documented, where that's the only way to go is Polo office and wait for them to be repatriated. So I believe UAE Philippine agency is doing their best, to protect this kind of sectors. They have for some time not allowed household workers to be employed here. So that's why in the immigration, and when you line up in the immigration and the airport, if you are traveling to UAE via tourist visa, they will immediately not allow you to be on board, because they feel that you'll be coming there as as a tourist or work for somebody else without being documented and be given to any other agency. So that's going to be a risk also. So I think on that part they have strictly implemented that. And as of now, as far as I know, there's no more or very less wards staying in the Polo office because of that mandate.
Sure. Okay. Irma Cosico, what do you...
Yes, Richard, I have 3 recommendations.
Okay.
The first one is observing that most OFWs have limited time for day off. So they go to the Philippine Embassy, the consulate office, asking for information. Sometimes the information is not there. So I suggested earlier that the pre-departure and the post-departure orientation seminar should be enhanced to include information as to where to get the right kind of information. There is that OWA office, there is POEA in the Philippines. So what kind of information do you get from them? And when you're abroad, what kind of information do you get from the Polo office, from the various offices, government offices overseas? So that's number one, teaching the departing expats or OFWs where to get the right kind of information, which government agency. As of now, this is not clear to them. And so the result is their one day off is sometimes devoted to gathering this kind of information. The second suggestion or recommendation is teaching our OFWs on digital literacy. I am now in digital literacy, not financial literacy. Why is digital literacy important? Again, with a limited 1 day off for every OFW, they usually spend time on long queue in Lucky Plaza in Singapore, in Central in Hong Kong, just to remit money to the Philippines, when in fact they can do it on their, in their employer's home when they are free, using their ATM. They just have to be taught on how to use their ATMs. So, and then not only remittances can be, digital currency can address the, the need to do remittance. It can also be used as a platform to save or to pay for the utility bills of your family back home. You don't have to send the money. You are sure that the money that is meant for utility bills will go to that. So you as an overseas Filipino worker pays directly the utilities of your family back home, even for education. So and then we have started opening OFW help desk in Iloilo. And the intention of that is for those OFWs who are rescued because of abuse. Now there is this phone app, mobile app, it's called Compass, that would enable the OFW who needs to be rescued to go directly or communicate directly with the Philippine Consulate Office or to the families immediately, real time. And what's happening now is it takes days or weeks before an OFW in distress is rescued. So if this mobile app can be, installed in every departing OFWs, then it would be easier to track OFWs who need help. And then the last one, Richard, which is the project that I'm currently working on, is have a school for returning OFWs. OFWs are returning for good. So this is to ensure that they would know if they're going to set up a business, they would be mentored and coached while here in the Philippines. It's different when you are already back home. There should be an institution or a group that would be willing to guide, to coach, and to mentor the returning OFWs to ensure that the business is successfully established. So I'm working on that project now, and I call it Post-Expat Repat Entrepreneurship Project. So I am now teaching the repatriated OFWs, who are mostly seafarers. So they're now setting up business. If every returning OFWs would avail of this opportunity, then they are sure that the fruits of their labor back in from overseas can be enjoyed by both the family and themselves. So those are the three, Richard, and it's still, a dream that should come true.
Sure, very good. Yes.
Very fantastic.
A short time off to spend most of the day, like my wife and her friends used to, standing in line trying to get information. Go ahead, Ray. What do you have to add?
Yeah, because Richard, you mentioned about what things that our government can do. There's one more thing that I want to address is we have so many like terminated like OFW like in Hong Kong, that when they have labor cases, for example, they have labor cases and they go to our consulate, actually our consulate kind of like, and this is my personal experience, it cannot really help. It can really help. So if you have labor cases in Hong Kong, you just go by yourself. So no assistance. So I think this could be addressed. So it could be given more. And another one is like, if they are terminated, hope that our consulate can have some shelter for them for free. Because if they go to the agency, if the agency charges them, and it's not that compared to the local things, but still they don't have work, so they don't have money, and then they still have to pay for the boarding house. So this is also things that I think they brought me up that I think if the government can give some shelter, free shelter that they can offer for them, I think that will really good for those people that are really terminate or in need of a shelter and they don't have like money. And if they have some like labor cases, I hope that our consulate can assist them, give them assistance, like to go to the labor department in Hong Kong and file a complaint or whatever, because they need someone to accompany them, or else the employer, if they go there by themselves alone, the employer can just abuse them and intimidate them sometimes. And it's good if they have a church, then we can go with them, but most of them, they don't have a church. So that's why they could not get any help.
All right.
Thank
so
you, Richard.
Good information and ideas. So thank you again, everyone. Pamela, Ray, Irma, Roby. We got quite a broad bunch and quite an interesting bunch, as you saw. So thank you again. That was Asia CEO Forum Expatriate Filipinos 2022. So thank you again. Okay, everyone, that was Asia CEO Forum Special Expat Filipino Edition, and a lot of interesting stories and a lot of things going on. So hopefully things only get better for the future for all of our millions of Filipinos across the world working their hearts out to make their families and their country better. So thank you again. That was Asia CEO Forum Special Expat Filipino Edition.
Oh, get ready with the show. First world is a go. Asia CEO, Asia CEO.